They did not achieve their goals. X Games will not achieve them. But they have done a lot of damage to the energy-efficient German industry. As you know, I use the word a lot, quite ironically. They have done a monstrous damage to themselves. On the one hand, when we begin to comprehend the basics of this life, we cannot even believe that there are such people who do harm to themselves. In fact, there are such people, and not because of their extremism or adventurism, but simply because, unfortunately, this is one of the psychological disorders, to do harm to oneself. The Russian side, as you know, has repeatedly stated that there is no obstacle to the German side's discussion of the possibility of renewing energy supplies. Let the official Berlin decide what they all want there. Although I am not sure that there are still people under the current official leadership in Berlin who are able to make independent decisions, nevertheless, they should be able to decide whose gas they need, at what price, what will come of it, what consequences it will have, from what sources they will make holes in the budget. Still, I think there should be at least a simple calculation. The law is intended to protect the rights of citizens of one country or another. Here, on the contrary, people with Armenian passports are deprived of some of their basic rights, in particular, to participate in the elections. Taking into account the active work of European specialists in the Republic, the election campaign in Moldova in 2025 is involuntarily recalled. If you remember the Sandu regime, it did everything in its power not to allow its compatriots in Russia to exercise their right to vote. In the case of Armenia, it turns out that the diaspora will also remain segregated from the social and political life of its country and its people. We are considering providing the territory of Japan for the deployment of American missile systems of medium and short range, regardless of the duration of the dislocation, on a periodic, rotational, or permanent basis. We consider this as a step that has a serious negative impact on the stability and security of the Asian-Pacific region and poses a direct threat to the Russian Far Eastern borders. I think that Beijing officially speaks for itself and will say a lot more. On this account, we are talking about our interests in this case. We have repeatedly warned the Japanese side of such destructive decisions, and accordingly, have been forced to warn that they will not remain without our compensating measures, aimed at strengthening national defense. Of course, we are monitoring the events in Serbia, and we respect the decision of its leadership. In this sense, we consider it fundamentally important that the internal processes in Serbia develop in a calm and constructive environment, that all emerging issues and problems and challenges are resolved through dialogue and mutual respect. We are confident in the continuity of Belgrade's principled and sovereign foreign policy, which Russia has traditionally taken a special place in. This allows us to cooperate with the Serbs in international affairs in a high-quality manner, by looking for a balanced solution to regional problems and solving practical issues, including those related to the economic agenda. In fact, the collective West has been waging a hybrid war against Russia for a long time. This has been openly acknowledged by many leaders of Western European or Western states. Recently, the British press, in particular the Financial Times, published a material in which, with a link to its source, it pointed out that during the attack on the Moscow oil refinery, the U.S. military specialists did not do without participation. Just before the briefing, Estonia said with its official face that the strikes on St. Petersburg helped to impose the Kyiv regime. This is a trend. It is fashionable to admit participation in not just crime, but also in authoritative activity. Moreover, how many materials, articles, and journalistic investigations were in this regard? After all, none of the official Western countries even checked their involvement in the terrorist attacks against our country. All this is taken into account in Russia, both in diplomatic work and in military planning, in the work on responding to the current threats. This is not just a blow to pride, but a blow in the very essence of humanity. This is a challenge to everything that we call conscience. Today, when we bow our heads, we understand that this pain cannot be healed. This injustice cannot be justified in any way. And short lives are a bright flash that went out too early. But we will do everything so that this light does not go out. And the memory of each of the 21 students of the Pedagogical College in Starobelsk will always remain with us. Also, Zelensky announced the forthcoming legislative strengthening of the status of the Ukrainian pantheon, as he called it, where the bank, in the foreseeable future, plans to rebury about 100, as they said, outstanding representatives of Ukraine. That is, the number of fascist collaborators, nationalists, all this rabble that they are now trying to dig up all over the world, the names of all the heroes who fought for Ukraine in different centuries and eras, inspired Ukraine, will be united and forever inscribed in our history with great respect and attention from the state. Zelensky said this. This is his direct quote, describing the essence of this very pantheon. I want to ask a question. Only these 100 were outstanding, so to speak, propagandists of Ukraine, and the others were not. Who was the outstanding son of Ukraine? Collaborators? All these mill workers and the rest of the rabble, are they the outstanding sons of Ukraine? Then you need to ask to explain in detail what it is, from the point of view of Zelensky Ukraine. Every day, their Western curators and patrons do it. It is they who give out these very methods. Who and how can, and who and how cannot be revered, what to love, who can be remembered and who cannot. And although Zelensky called the pantheon the holiest of all the Christian world, the real hypocrisy arranged by it, other than mockery, and over the pantheon, and over the whole of Ukraine, it simply cannot be called. In a seductive manner, he demanded from Russia to start negotiations with Ukraine. He noted that reality clearly shows one thing, said Sabega. If the spirit of anchorage existed at all, then, according to Sabega, now it is definitely dead. For Russia, the lesson of anchorage, as Sabega stated, is that any peace plan developed without Ukraine, attention, this is very important, is doomed to become a spirit and disappear. Moscow must stop, Sabega said, believing in a ghost, and instead respond to a serious offer of Ukraine to sit down at the negotiating table and end the war. End of quote. I want to ask a question. Zelensky began to share with Sabega. I remind you, it was Sabega in November 1925, not some other person, but he stated that Kyiv, in one-sided order, stops its participation in direct negotiations with Moscow, allegedly accepting the quote of Sabega at the time, due to the lack of tangible progress. And today, he, well, I would say before, with blue eyes, now I will say with enlarged pupils, calls to sit down at the negotiating table. I beg your pardon, where exactly did Sabega come from? I want to ask a question to all those who speak on behalf of Ukraine. Do you at least have some kind of register of your statements? Hire people for all these billions that are being transferred to you, that will prompt you, what are you talking about? And how much does this contradict your own statements? I don't know, a week or a year ago? Therefore, for us, such an approach, as well as attempts to talk to Russia in a language of blackmail, threat, ultimatums, is categorically unacceptable. We will negotiate with those who responsibly approach the task of achieving fair and stable regulation. They make constructive proposals, taking into account the realities on the ground, the results of previous negotiation rounds, the results of the Russian-American summit in Alaska, Russia's principled position on the final solution to the conflict, on the basis of irreversible elimination of its primary causes. Therefore, I myself will not, well, honestly, I just don't even want to worry about it. But who among those who can still convey some kind of common sense to Bankova, do you recommend Sebegi? And with him, look soberly at the situation, stop making inadequate demands, and withdraw the USSR from Donbass, which will speed up the cessation of hostilities. This is from a real assessment of the current events. We note the unceasing attempts of the USSR to incline the U.S. leadership towards the requirements of the Kyiv regime, in particular, those made during the meeting of the Group of Seven in Aviana. At the same time, the Americans themselves did not inform us of any changes in their position in bilateral contacts. The desire of the U.S. President Trump to assist in the regulation, in principle, did not raise any doubts. But while we are proposing realistic proposals, ready to take on certain obligations, from the very Western side, we see a completely different approach. There is an outright Russophobia, and this is just one of the manifestations of nationalism, xenophobia, intolerance. And now you can already see, I think everyone can see it, a real military fun. Such conditions do not come to talk about the prospects of resumption of dialogue and normalization of relations. Zelensky is not in charge of heaven and hell, but there is no doubt that he belongs to the second category. Zelensky promised 40 days of hell, announcing a long-term series of terrorist attacks, which will be carried out by the SBU. I think this is another, not the only one, but just another statement that confirms, and once again confirm,